When I walked into that five-star restaurant dressed in my oldest, most worn-out clothes, pretending to be a struggling woman barely making ends meet, I had no idea that by the end of the night, my daughter-in-law's entire family would be sitting in stunned silence, their faces drained of color, as I revealed a truth that shattered every assumption they'd made about me. What they said to me that night, how they treated me when they thought I was poor, broke my heart. But what I did next, well, that changed everything. My name is Brielle, and I'm 58 years old. I've spent the last 3 decades building a life, raising my son Daniel, and climbing my way to a position I never dreamed possible when I started out as a file clerk making $7 an hour. This is a story about dignity, about respect, and about what happens when people judge you by the size of your wallet instead of the content of your character. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the truth is, the seeds of that devastating dinner were planted long before anyone sat down at that table. For most of my adult life, I've lived quietly, not because I had to, but because I chose to. You see, 35 years ago, I was a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. Daniel's father left when I was 6 months pregnant, and my family, well, let's just say they made their opinions about my situation very clear. I was on my own. I worked during the day at an insurance company filing papers, and at night I cleaned offices. Daniel stayed with a neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who charged me almost nothing because she saw how hard I was trying. I remember those years like they were yesterday. I remember buying Day, old bread from the bakery on 5th Street, because it was 50 cents cheaper. I remember Daniel wearing shoes that were half a size too small, because we couldn't afford new ones yet. I remember crying in the bathroom at work because I was so tired, so scared, so uncertain if I was doing enough. But I also remember making a promise to myself. I promised that I would never stop trying, never stop learning, never stop climbing. So I did something that seemed impossible at the time. I enrolled in night classes. 2 evenings a week, after my cleaning shift ended at 10 p.m., I would sit in a community college classroom and study business administration. It took me 7 years to get my associate degree. 7 years of sacrificing sleep, of studying while Daniel did his homework at the kitchen table, of drinking cheap instant coffee to stay awake. And it paid off. Slowly, painfully slowly, I moved up, from file clerk to administrative assistant, from administrative assistant to office manager, from office manager to operations supervisor. By the time Daniel was in high school, I had become a regional manager. By the time he graduated college, I was a director. And 3 years ago, I was promoted to senior vice president of operations for a pharmaceutical distribution company that operates in 11 states. I earned $340,000 a year. With bonuses, stock options, and profit sharing, my annual compensation is close to $500,000. I have investments that generate another 6 figures in passive income. I own my home outright, a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood that I bought 20 years ago for $180,000, and that's now worth $520,000. I have retirement accounts worth over $2 million. I could retire tomorrow and live comfortably for the rest of my life. But here's the thing. I never told Daniel any of this, not the exact numbers anyway. Oh, he knew I had a good job. He knew I worked in corporate management. But I never discussed my salary, never flaunted my position, never lived in a way that would reveal just how successful I'd become. I drove a 10-year-old Toyota Camry. I shopped at Target and Kohl's. I cooked dinner at home most nights. I lived simply, purposefully, because I wanted Daniel to grow up understanding the value of hard work, not the comfort of wealth he didn't earn. Daniel turned out wonderfully. He went to State University on a partial academic scholarship and worked part-time to cover the rest. I could have paid his tuition in full without blinking, but I didn't. I helped modestly, matching what he earned from his campus job, and he graduated with only $12,000 in student loans manageable character building. He became a civil engineer, started at a good firm, and worked his way up to project manager. He bought his first condo at 28, and I was so proud I cried. Then 3 years ago, he met Natasha. Natasha was beautiful, polished, and came from what Daniel called a well-established family. Her father, Gregory, owned a chain of high-end furniture stores. Her mother, Claudine, was a former model who now ran some kind of lifestyle consulting business. They lived in a gated community, drove luxury cars, and vacationed in Europe twice a year. From the first time Daniel mentioned them, I could feel a subtle shift in the way he talked about his own life, about our family, about me. Mom, Natasha's parents they're pretty successful, he said one evening over dinner at my house. We were eating spaghetti with meat sauce, one of his childhood favorites. They're used to a certain lifestyle. I looked up from my plate. That's nice, sweetheart. I'm glad she comes from a good family. He shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, I want to make sure you know when you meet them that. He trailed off. That what? I asked gently, though something in my chest was already tightening. Just that you're comfortable. They can be a little formal, that's all. I smiled and squeezed his hand. Daniel, I've been in corporate boardrooms with CEO and executives for 20 years. I think I can handle meeting your girlfriend's parents. But he didn't know that, did he? Because I'd never told him. To Daniel, I was just his mom who worked in an office and lived in a small house and drove an old car. He had no idea that just that afternoon, I'd been in a meeting where we discussed a $50 million distribution contract, or that the office I worked in had my name on the door and a secretary outside it. Over the next year, as Daniel and Natasha's relationship grew serious, I met them a handful of times. Gregory and Claudine were cordial, but there was always something beneath the surface, a certain coolness. A way Claudine's eyes would sweep over my department store blouse and discount shoes. A way Gregory would dominate conversations with stories about his business successes, never once asking about my work. At Daniel and Natasha's engagement party, held at an upscale country club, I wore my nicest dress, a simple navy blue sheath I'd bought on sale at Macy's 5 years earlier. Claudine wore Chanel. When she introduced me to her friends, she said, "This is Brielle, Daniel's mother. She works in administration." The tone was kind, but the subtext was clear. Asterisk, she's not one of us. Asterisk, I smiled and nodded and said nothing. The wedding was elegant. I contributed what Daniel expected, a modest check for $5,000 toward the reception costs. Gregory and Claudine paid for most of it, a fact Claudine mentioned at least a dozen times during the planning process. "We just want the best for our daughter," she would say, smiling at me in a way that suggested I couldn't possibly understand what the best meant. I smiled and nodded and said nothing. After the wedding, Daniel and Natasha moved into a beautiful townhouse in a new development. Gregory gave them $40,000 for the down payment. Claudine furnished the entire living room with pieces from Gregory's stores. I gave them a set of high-quality cookware and a gift card to a home improvement store. $800 total, which Daniel hugged me for and said was so generous, Mom, thank you. And I smiled and nodded and said nothing. For 2 years I watched. I watched as Natasha slowly, subtly, began to distance Daniel from me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't overt, it was small things. Daniel used to call me every Sunday evening, our tradition since he'd moved out for college. Slowly, those calls became every other Sunday, then monthly. When I'd call him, Natasha would often answer. "Oh, he's busy with a project right now, Brielle. Can he call you back?" He rarely did. Holiday dinners shifted. Thanksgiving had always been at my house, turkey, stuffing, pumpkin pie, the works. But after the wedding, Natasha suggested they alternate years between families. That first Thanksgiving at Gregory and Claudine's was illuminating. The table was set with china that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Gregory carved a heritage breed turkey he'd special ordered from some farm upstate. Claudine served wine that she explained, in great detail, was from a private vineyard in Napa. When I offered to bring my green bean casserole, Daniel's favorite, Claudine smiled tightly and said, "That's so sweet, but I've already planned the full menu. We wouldn't want anything to clash." I smiled and nodded and said nothing, but I felt it. That slow, creeping realization that I was being categorized, dismissed, gently pushed to the margins because I didn't fit their image. Because in their eyes, I was Daniel's sweet but simple mother who worked some office job and couldn't possibly contribute to their level of sophistication. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening about 6 months ago. My phone rang just as I was finishing dinner. Leftover chicken stir-fry I'd made the night before. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart." I answered warmly. "This is a nice surprise." "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded strained. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course, always. What's going on?" There was a pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering his words. "So, Natasha's parents are coming to visit next month. Her brother, too. He's flying in from California. It's kind of a family reunion thing. And, well, Natasha really wants you to meet her extended family properly." My heart lifted. "That sounds lovely. I'd be happy to." "Great. So, they're planning this big dinner at Marcella's." Marcella's. I knew the name. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and a single dinner costs what some people earn in a week. "That's quite fancy," I said carefully. "Yeah, Gregory's treating everyone. But, Mom." Another pause. Longer this time. "Natasha's family, especially her brother Marcus and his wife Simone. They're pretty. They're successful, like very successful, and they can be kind of judgmental." Something cold settled in my stomach. Judgmental how? They have high standards about success, about status, that kind of thing. And I know you don't care about that stuff, which I love about you, but I just want you to be prepared. They might ask questions about your work, your life, and they can be blunt. I see. My voice remained calm, but my mind was racing. And Natasha thought maybe, and this is just a suggestion, Mom, you don't have to, but maybe you could, dress up a little, like wear something nice, because her family will be really dressed up, and we don't want you to feel out of place. There it was, the thing I'd been feeling for 2 years, finally spoken aloud. Asterisk, we don't want you to embarrass us. Asterisk, I closed my eyes. Daniel, are you asking me to pretend to be something I'm not? No, Mom, of course not. I want you to be comfortable, and I want them to see how great you are. But they judge people based on appearances, and I don't want them to dismiss you before they even know you. Dismiss me. The words hung in the air. Okay, I said quietly. I'll do my best. Thanks, Mom. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. I hung up the phone and sat there in my small kitchen with my leftover stir-fry going cold on the table, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt small. I felt ashamed, not of who I was or what I'd accomplished, but ashamed that my own son felt he needed to apologize for me, to warn his wife's family about me, to ask me to dress up so I wouldn't embarrass him. And that's when I made a decision. If they wanted to judge me, I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would walk into that restaurant as the poorest, most unsophisticated, most dismissible version of myself I could possibly present. I would play the role they'd already written for me in their minds, and I would watch very carefully how they treated someone they believed was beneath them. Because I suspected, no, I knew that their treatment of me would reveal everything I needed to know about these people. And more importantly, it would reveal to Daniel exactly who he'd married into. It was time for the truth to come out. All of it, The dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at 7 o'clock. I had 3 weeks to prepare, and I used that time wisely. Not to shop for an elegant outfit or practice small talk, but to do something I'd never done before. I researched my audience. I started with social media. Natasha's brother Marcus had a public Instagram account filled with photos of luxury watches, exotic cars, and expensive restaurants. His bio read, entrepreneur, investor, living life on my terms. His wife Simone's account was equally revealing designer handbags, first-class plane tickets, and endless photos of their sprawling home in Orange County. Every post was carefully curated to broadcast one message. Asterisk, we have money, and we want you to know it. Asterisk, Gregory and Claudine were less active online, but their presence was there too. Photos from charity galas where they posed with local politicians. Articles from regional business magazines about Gregory's furniture empire. Claudine's lifestyle blog where she shared tips for elegant living that included things like investing in quality silk scarves and the importance of a signature fragrance. These were people who measured worth in dollars and status in brand names. These were people who had built their entire identity around the appearance of success. And I knew without a doubt that they would look at me, the way I dressed, the car I drove, the neighborhood I lived in, and conclude that I was insignificant. Perfect. I began assembling my costume. I went to a thrift store and bought the dowdiest outfit I could find. A shapeless beige cardigan that hung limply on my frame, a floral blouse with a bow at the neck that screamed 1987, and a pair of polyester pants in a dull brown. The total cost was $11.50. I found a pair of worn white sneakers in my closet, the kind I wore for yard work, and a large, outdated purse with a broken zipper. I practiced my persona, timid smiles, nervous laughter, humble responses. I would talk about my job vaguely, mentioning filing and paperwork, and letting them fill in the blanks with their assumptions. I would ask questions about their successes, letting them dominate the conversation. I would be exactly what they expected, a sweet, simple woman who was trying her best but clearly out of her depth in their sophisticated world. The day of the dinner arrived. I spent the morning at home, actually working. I had a video conference with our West Coast distribution centers about a supply chain issue. I sat in my home office wearing my usual work, from home attire, a crisp button-down and blazers on top, pajama pants on bottom. On my desk sat a framed photo of Daniel at his college graduation, beaming with pride. Next to it was a Crystal Award I'd received 2 years ago, Executive of the Year, Regional Operations. I looked at that award for a long moment. Then I turned it face down. At 5 o'clock, I began my transformation. I styled my hair in a dated, fussy way with too much volume on top. I applied minimal makeup, just enough to look like I'd tried but didn't quite know what I was doing. I put on the thrift store outfit, the worn sneakers, and grabbed the broken, zippered purse. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked exactly like what Gregory and Claudine probably imagined. A woman struggling to keep up, trying her best, but clearly not in their league. I smiled at my reflection. Showtime, I whispered. I drove my 10-year-old Camry to Marcella's. The parking lot was full of gleaming luxury vehicles, Mercedes, BMWs, a Porsche, even a Bentley. My dusty Toyota looked hilariously out of place. The valet gave it a puzzled look when I handed him the keys. "Will this be okay here?" I asked timidly, playing my role. "Of course, ma'am," he said politely, though I saw him exchange a glance with his colleague. I walked into the restaurant. Marcella's was exactly as I'd imagined. Low lighting, soft classical music, tables draped in white linen, and an air of exclusivity that felt almost tangible. The hostess, a young woman in an elegant black dress, greeted me with a professional smile that flickered slightly when she took in my appearance. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation? Yes, I'm here with the Castellano party. Her smile brightened recognition of a significant reservation. Of course, right this way. She led me through the restaurant. I was acutely aware of eyes following me, other diners glancing up, taking in my discount store outfit among their designer wear. I kept my head slightly down, my shoulders rounded, my steps small and uncertain, and then I saw them. The table was in a semi-private alcove toward the back, a large round table that could seat 10. Gregory sat at the head, looking every bit the patriarch in a charcoal suit and burgundy tie. Claudine was to his right, wearing a cream-colored dress that I recognized from a recent fashion magazine, retail price around $3.00. Daniel and Natasha sat together. Daniel in a sharp navy suit I'd never seen before. Natasha in a cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. And then there were the others, a younger man who had to be Marcus handsome, late 30s, wearing a suit that fit so perfectly it had to be custom tailored. Next to him was a stunning woman in a red dress with diamonds at her throat and wrists, Simone. Two other people I didn't recognize sat across from them, equally well dressed. They all looked up as I approached. The silence lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I watched their faces carefully, cataloging every micro-expression. Gregory's eyebrows rose slightly. Claudine's mouth formed a small O of surprise before quickly rearranging into a polite smile. Marcus's eyes traveled from my shoes to my face, and I saw the exact moment he categorized me. Asterisk not important. Asterisk Daniel stood up quickly, his face flushed. Mom, you made it. Everyone, this is my mother, Brielle. I gave a small, nervous wave. Hello, I'm so sorry I'm late. I had trouble finding parking. You're not late at all. Gregory said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm but brief, as if he didn't want to touch me too long. Welcome. Please sit. The only empty chair was between Claudine and one of the people I didn't recognize. I made my way over, clutching my purse with both hands like a life preserver. As I sat down, I saw Natasha whisper something to Daniel. His jaw tightened. Brielle, let me introduce everyone. Claudine said with practiced grace. This is my son Marcus and his wife Simone, and this is my sister Vivienne and her husband Robert. I smiled at each of them. It's so nice to meet you all. I've heard so much about you. Likewise, Simone said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Her eyes, I noticed, kept drifting to my cardigan. A waiter appeared with menus heavy leather, bound things without prices. He placed one in front of me, and I opened it with exaggerated care, my eyes widening as I scanned the selections. Everything looks so fancy, I said softly. I've never been to a place like this before. Marcella's is one of the finest restaurants in the state, Gregory said proudly. I've been a regular here for 15 years. The chef, Antonio, is a personal friend. How wonderful, I said, my voice full of genuine and sounding awe. Claudine leaned toward me slightly. Brielle, have you had a chance to look at the menu? If you need any recommendations, I'm happy to help. Some of the dishes can be a bit sophisticated. There it was, the first subtle dig, delivered with a smile. Oh, that would be so helpful, I said gratefully. I'm not really familiar with. What is this? So, buco, osso buco. Marcus corrected, his tone patient but condescending. It's an Italian veal dish, braised veal shanks, very tender, very rich. That sounds lovely, but I lowered my voice, leaning toward Claudine. How much does something like that usually cost? I want to be mindful of, you know. Claudine's eyes lit up. She'd found her opening. Oh, Brielle, don't worry about the cost, Claudine said, reaching over to pat my hand. Gregory is treating everyone tonight. Please order whatever you'd like. Are you sure? I asked, making my voice small. I don't want to be. I mean, I could just get a salad or something simple. Nonsense. Gregory boomed. Order whatever appeals to you. That's what we're here for. To celebrate family, Family, the word hung in the air with a particular weight. The waiter returned and everyone began ordering. I listened carefully to their choices. Marcus ordered the Wagyu beef. $185, I knew from my research. Simone requested the lobster tail with truffle risotto. Gregory chose a tomahawk steak. Claudine ordered sea bass. Even Daniel, my frugal son who used to get excited about Chipotle, ordered a duck confit that cost $78. When the waiter turned to me, I hesitated. I'll have. Do you have chicken? Just plain chicken. The waiter blinked. We have a chicken breast with. He glanced at his notepad with morel mushroom sauce, roasted fingerling potatoes, and seasonal vegetables. That sounds fine, thank you. As the waiter left, I saw Simone and Vivienne exchange a look. The kind of look that women share when they're silently communicating their judgment. So, Brielle, Marcus began, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who's never doubted his place in the world. Daniel tells me you work in administration. Yes, that's right. What kind of administration? Medical, legal? Oh, just corporate, filing, organizing, that sort of thing. I see, and have you been doing that for a long time? Most of my life. I said, which was technically true, that's honest work. Gregory interjected, though his tone suggested he was being magnanimous. Every organization needs people who keep things running behind the scenes. Asterisk behind the scenes. Asterisk as if I were a janitor instead of the person who kept $2 billion in pharmaceutical products moving efficiently through 11 states. How long have you been with your current company? Simone asked, taking a sip of what looked like expensive wine. About 30 years. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. 30 years in the same position. Well, I've moved up a little bit over the years, I said modestly. But nothing dramatic. The truth, I'd started as a file clerk and was now one of 3 senior VP in the entire organization. I oversaw 400 employees directly and another 0 indirectly, but they didn't need to know that. Loyalty is admirable, Claudine said. In this day and age, people job hop so much. It's nice to see someone who values stability over ambition. The subtext was clear. Asterisk, you settled. You didn't strive for more. Asterisk, I smiled. I just tried to do my best with what I have. That's a wonderful attitude. Vivienne chimed in. Her voice had that particular quality of someone speaking to a child or a pet sweet, but ultimately dismissive. Not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder. Some people are just happy where they are. Asterisk, some people. Asterisk, not asterisk, she's happy. Asterisk, but asterisk, some people, asterisk. A category I'd now been placed into. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom's always been really dedicated to her work. She put me through college. With help from student loans, I imagine. Gregory asked, making it sound like a casual question rather than an assessment of my financial capacity. Yes, Daniel had some loans, I admitted, but he worked hard and paid them off. Good for him, Marcus said. Self-made success is the best kind. I paid for my MBA entirely on my own, though Dad did let me live at home during that time, which saved me about $30 in rent. So not entirely on his own, then, but I nodded appreciatively. The appetizers arrived, things I couldn't even identify, arranged on plates like edible art. Simone had ordered oysters that came on a bed of ice with 3 different sauces. Marcus had beef carpaccio. Claudine's burrata looked like it cost more than my entire outfit. I had a small Caesar salad, which I ate quietly while the conversation flowed around me. They talked about their lives, their achievements, their acquisitions. Marcus described his latest investment property, a small vacation home in Lake Tahoe that he'd purchased for $2 million. Simone discussed the renovation they were planning, which would only cost another $300. Vivienne mentioned the new Mercedes she'd just leased. I prefer to upgrade every 2 years. I get bored with cars. No one asked me about my life. No one inquired if I had hobbies, interests, or dreams. I had been categorized and dismissed exactly as I'd predicted. But then Claudine turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes that made me understand this was about to get worse. "Brielle, I hope you don't mind me asking," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "But are you doing okay? Financially, I mean." The table went quiet. I'm managing," I said carefully. "It's just that Daniel mentioned you still rent your home, after all these years." I felt Daniel tense beside me. "Mom, you don't have to." "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, putting my hand on his arm. I looked at Claudine. "Yes, I rent. I never quite saved enough for a down payment, and with raising Daniel alone, it just never seemed like the right time. This was a lie, of course. I'd owned my home outright for 5 years, having paid off the mortgage early, but they didn't know that." Claudine's face arranged itself into an expression of pity. "Oh, that must be so stressful. Rent prices these days with no equity being built, and at your age not having that security." "I manage," I repeated quietly. "What about retirement?" Gregory asked, leaning forward. "Do you have a 401k, investments?" "A small 401k, I said. "I put in what I can. The truth, my retirement accounts were worth $3 million. I maxed out my contributions every year and had for 2 decades. But again, they didn't need to know that." Gregory shook his head sympathetically. "It's tough out there for working-class folks. The system really doesn't favor the little guy anymore." Working, class, the little guy. I was now officially poverty porn for their dinner conversation. "We've tried to help Daniel and Natasha as much as we can," Claudine continued. "We gave them the down payment for their townhouse, $40,000. We felt it was important to give our daughter a strong start in her marriage." The implication was clear. You couldn't do that for your son. That was very generous of you, I said softly. "We believe in supporting family," Gregory added. "In fact, we've already set up a trust fund for when Natasha and Daniel have children. We want our grandchildren to have opportunities." The entrees arrived, and I had never been more grateful for a distraction. My chicken looked delicious, though plain compared to the elaborate dishes surrounding me. I cut into it carefully, taking small bites, keeping my eyes on my plate, but Claudine wasn't done. "Brielle, this is probably awkward to discuss, but..." She paused, as if gathering courage, though I could tell this was calculated. "Are you planning to rely on Daniel for support as you get older? I only ask because Natasha and I have discussed this, and we want to make sure we're all on the same page about expectations." I looked up slowly. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral. "What do you mean?" "Well, if you haven't been able to save much for retirement and you're still renting, there may come a time when you need financial assistance. And while we love Daniel, we also want to make sure that any support he provides to you doesn't impact his and Natasha's financial stability." There it was. Out in the open, they were worried I would be a financial burden on their daughter's lifestyle. Daniel's face had gone red. "Claudine, that's not. It's a fair question," Marcus interrupted. "Elder care is expensive. If Brielle doesn't have long-term care insurance or significant savings, someone will have to pay for it eventually. Better to have these conversations now than wait for crisis." I sat there, letting the full weight of their judgment wash over me. These people, these wealthy, comfortable, privileged people, were sitting in a $500 per person restaurant discussing whether I, Daniel's mother, who had raised him alone and put him through college, would be too much of a financial inconvenience for them in my old age, and something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, but beneath it, something else was rising, cold, crystalline clarity. These people didn't see me as a human being. They saw me as a problem to be managed, an embarrassment to be contained, a cost to be calculated. I put down my fork carefully and looked at Claudine. "You don't need to worry about me being a burden to Daniel," I said quietly. "I've always taken care of myself, and I always will." "Of course," Claudine said quickly, though her tone suggested she didn't quite believe me. "We didn't mean to imply. It's just that we've seen it happen," Simone interjected, leaning forward. Her diamond necklace caught the light. Friends whose parents didn't plan properly, and it falls on the children to support them. It creates such strain on marriages. "I understand," I said. "Do you have health insurance at least?" Vivienne asked, "through your employer." "Yes, I have health insurance." "And what about life insurance?" Gregory asked. "Because funeral costs these days." Dad, stop. Natasha said sharply. It was the first time she'd spoken in several minutes. Her face was flushed. "This isn't appropriate. We're just being practical, sweetheart," Claudine said. "These are things families should discuss." But I noticed something in that moment. Natasha wasn't looking at her parents with agreement. She was looking at them with embarrassment, and when her eyes flicked to me, I saw something unexpected: shame. She knew, some part of her knew this was wrong. Daniel reached under the table and took my hand. "Mom, you don't have to answer any of this." I squeezed his hand back. "It's okay. They're just concerned about you. That's natural." But inside I was making calculations. I was watching each of them, noting their body language, their expressions, the way they leaned in when discussing my poverty, as if it were a fascinating case study. Marcus looked almost entertained. Simone looked satisfied, as if my struggles confirmed her world. Gregory looked magnanimous, the wealthy man considering how to graciously handle his son-in-law's unfortunate family situation. And Claudine looked triumphant. This was what she'd wanted all along, not just to meet me, but to establish the hierarchy, to make it clear that their family was superior to mine, that Natasha had married beneath her station, and they would need to compensate for Daniel's lack of family resources. The rest of dinner continued in the same vein. They asked me condescending questions about my life, made sympathetic noises, and exchanged knowing glances with each other. At one point, Marcus offered to connect me with a financial advisor who could help people in my situation. Vivienne suggested I look into government assistance programs for seniors. Robert, who'd been mostly quiet, asked if I'd considered getting a roommate to split rent costs. I smiled and nodded and thanked them for their concern. And I remembered everything when dessert arrived: an elaborate tiramisu for most of the table, a simple scoop of vanilla gelato for me. Claudine pulled out her phone. "I want to get a family photo," she announced. "Everyone squeeze in." We rearranged our chairs. The waiter was summoned to take the photo. I found myself on the far end, slightly separated from the main group, as if I were an appendage rather than a part of the family. Claudine stood between Daniel and Natasha, her hands on both their shoulders, claiming them visually. "Say, Castellano family," she directed. We all smiled. The camera clicked several times. "Perfect," Claudine said, reviewing the photos. "I'll send these to everyone." But I noticed she cropped me out of the version she immediately posted to her Instagram. The caption read, "Family dinner at Marcella's with our beautiful daughter and wonderful son-in-law. So blessed. Read, no mention of me." As if I hadn't been there at all. When the check came, it was presented to Gregory in a leather portfolio. He opened it with the casual confidence of someone for whom money is no object. His eyes scanned the total, which I estimated to be around $2,800, and he pulled out a Black American Express card without hesitation. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," he said warmly. "It's so important for family to spend quality time together." He looked at me. "Brielle, I hope this wasn't too overwhelming for you. I know places like this can be intimidating if you're not used to them." "It was lovely," I said softly. "Thank you so much for including me." "Of course," Claudine said. "You're Daniel's mother. You're part of the family." But her eyes said, asterisk the lesser part. Asterisk, as we stood to leave, Claudine pulled me aside. Her hand was on my elbow, her grip gentle but firm. The gesture of someone guiding a confused elderly person. Brielle, I wanted to talk to you privately about something, she said, her voice low, of course. Daniel and Natasha are going to have a wonderful life together. We're going to make sure of that, but I want you to know that if you ever find yourself in a difficult situation, financially, I mean you can come to us. We don't want Daniel to feel obligated to sacrifice his future for. She trailed off delicately, but her meaning was clear, asterisk for you. Asterisk, that's very kind, I said. We're thinking of setting up a small fund, maybe $500 a month, just to help with your basic expenses. That way Daniel won't worry and you'll have some security. Would that be helpful? $500 a month. To someone in genuine financial distress, that would be meaningful. To me, it was less than I spent on coffee and lunches in a month. But more than the amount, it was the gesture, the assumption that I would accept their charity, that I would become dependent on their generosity, that I would be beholden to them. Can I think about it? I asked, of course, take your time. She patted my arm. I just want you to know we care. But what she meant was, asterisk, I want you to know we're in control. Asterisk, the valet brought around their cars, first Gregory's Mercedes, Marcus's Tesla, Vivienne's Lexus. They stood in a cluster under the restaurant's elegant awning, their expensive cars gleaming under the lights, looking like an advertisement for success. My Camry was brought around last. The valet had to squeeze between a Porsche and a Range Rover to get to it. When it pulled up, dusty and humble among the luxury vehicles, I heard Simone actually gasp, Is that your car?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine shock. "Yes," I said simply, "it must be. How old is that?" "About 10 years. And it still runs?" Marcus asked, as if I were driving a covered wagon. "Very well, actually. Toyotas are reliable." I saw them exchange looks. This was worse than they'd imagined. Not only was I poor, but I was driving a car that probably embarrassed Daniel every time he was seen with me. "Mom, you know if you ever need help with a car payment." Daniel began, his face pained. "I'm fine, sweetheart. This car suits me perfectly." I tipped the valet $5, carefully counted out from my purse, and got into my car. Through the window, I saw them all watching me, pitying me, judging me, congratulating themselves on their generosity toward Daniel's unfortunate mother. I drove home slowly, taking the long way, giving myself time to process. By the time I pulled into my modest neighborhood, parked in my modest driveway, and walked into my modest house, I had made my decision. It was time to stop playing. Sunday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. as usual. I made coffee, sat in my home office, and opened my laptop. The Crystal Executive of the Year award was still face, down on my desk. I picked it up, looked at it, and set it upright. Then I began to plan. First, I pulled up my bank accounts. My primary checking showed a balance of $48,000. I kept a cushion for expenses and emergencies. My savings account held $125,000. My investment accounts, a mix of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, totaled just over $8 million. My 401k was at $3 million. The equity in my home was roughly $520,000. Total net worth, approximately $8 million. I sat back and let that number sink in. I was, by any reasonable definition, wealthy. Not Bezos wealthy, not private jet wealthy, but comfortably, securely, never have to worry, again wealthy. And these people, these judgmental, condescending, self-important people, had spent an entire evening treating me like I was one step away from homelessness. I opened a new document and began typing. It was time to craft my response, but not in the way they expected. I wasn't going to send an angry email, or make a dramatic phone call. No, I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to arrange a reveal that they would never forget. I started by calling my executive assistant, Jennifer. She answered on the second ring, despite it being Sunday morning. "Good morning, Brielle. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I need a favor, and it's going to sound strange." "I'm listening." "I need you to book a private dining room at Marcella's for next Saturday evening, 7 p.m. for 11 people. Marcella's. The restaurant. Yes, that's not a corporate event. No, it's personal, but I want the booking to be under the company account. Make it clear that this is for a senior executive. I want their best room, their best service, and I want Antonio, the head chef, to prepare something exceptional." Price is no object. There was a pause. "Brielle, what are you planning? And education, can you do it?" "Consider it done." Next, I called Daniel. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice groggy. "Mom." "It's early. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I need to talk to you about something important. Is everything okay?" "Are you upset about last night? Because I want you to know that I was, Daniel. I need you to arrange another dinner." "Same group, same restaurant, next Saturday." "Silence, Mom. I don't think that's a good idea. Last night was. It was too much. Claudine was out of line, and I told her so after you left. She and I had words about how they treated you. My heart warmed. You defended me." "Of course I did. You're my mother, and the way they talked to you, the questions they asked, it was humiliating." "I'm so sorry you had to sit through that. Don't apologize, Daniel. In fact, I'm grateful it happened. Grateful." "Yes, because now I know exactly who they are. And now I'm going to show them exactly who I am. So I need you to set up this dinner." "Tell them it's your idea. Tell them you want to do something nice for everyone to make up for the tension last night. Tell them you're treating this time. Mom, I can't afford to treat everyone at Marcella's. That dinner cost almost $3,000. Don't worry about the cost. I'll handle it. Just get them there. Can you do that?" He hesitated. "What are you planning? Trust me?" "Please." Another pause. Then, "Okay. I trust you. I'll make the calls today. Thank you, sweetheart. And Daniel, wear your best suit. The occasion calls for it." I hung up and smiled. The week passed slowly. Jennifer confirmed the reservation. The Leonardo Room, Marcella's most exclusive private dining space, typically reserved for celebrities and corporate executives. Antonio himself would be overseeing the menu. The company account would cover everything. They were falling over themselves to accommodate you. Jennifer reported, "I think they're hoping for more corporate events." Perfect. I spent the week preparing in other ways too. I went shopping, but not at my usual discount stores. I went to the boutiques in the downtown shopping district, the ones with buzzing systems on the doors and personal shoppers. I bought a dress, a stunning charcoal gray sheath with subtle silver threading, designer label, $1,800. I bought shoes, Italian leather, $600. I bought a handbag, understated but unmistakably expensive, $2,400. I had my hair professionally styled at a salon where a simple cut and color cost $400. Total for my transformation, just over $5,000. I looked at myself in the mirror. This was who I'd hidden for years. This was the woman who sat in boardrooms and made $1,000,000 decisions. This was the woman who'd built an empire while letting everyone think she was just filing paperwork. It was time for her to make an appearance. Saturday arrived. I spent the day calm, centered, preparing. Mentally, at 5 p.m., I began getting ready. I took a long shower, styled my hair, applied professional makeup. I put on the dress, the shoes, the jewelry. A simple but elegant pearl necklace and matching earrings that had been my mother's, worth about $8,000. At 6:30 p.m., I didn't get into my Camry. Instead, I opened my garage to reveal something I'd been keeping hidden, a 3-year-old BMW 5 Series, immaculate, barely driven. I'd bought it 2 years ago when I made senior VP, telling myself I deserved it, but I'd rarely used it. It seemed too ostentatious, too much of a statement. Tonight, it was exactly the statement I needed. I drove to Marcella's, arriving at 6:55 p.m. The valet's eyes widened when I stepped out. This was not the woman in the old Camry from last week. I handed him the keys and walked inside with my head high, my shoulders back, my stride confident. The maitre d' recognized me immediately, not as last week's embarrassment, but as the name on tonight's reservation. M.S. Richardson, welcome. We're honored to host you this evening. Right this way. He led me to the Leonardo room. It was stunning. A private space with its own entrance. A single large table set for 11 crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The table was set with the finest china, premium glassware, and fresh orchids as centerpieces. Your guests will be directed here as they arrive. The maitre d' said, Chef Antonio sends his regards and looks forward to serving you this evening. Thank you. I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, and waited. They arrived together, a cluster of confusion. I heard them before I saw them. Gregory's booming voice asking the hostess where they were supposed to go, Claudine's concerned tone asking if Daniel had gotten the reservation details right. The maitre d' opened the door to the Leonardo room, and they filed in and stopped. The first thing they saw was the room, clearly not the main dining area where we'd sat last week. This was private, exclusive, expensive. The second thing they saw was me, standing by the window in my designer dress, looking nothing like the woman they'd pitied 7 days ago. Mom. Daniel's voice was stunned. I turned and smiled. Hello, everyone. Please come in. Sit down. They stood frozen in the doorway. I watched their faces carefully. Gregory's confusion, Claudine's shock, Marcus's furrowed brow, Simone's open mouthed surprise, Vivienne's wide eyes, Robert's bewilderment, and Natasha's dawning realization. Please, I said again, gesturing to the table. Sit. We have a lot to talk about. They moved slowly, uncertainly, taking seats around the table. Daniel sat next to me, his hand finding mine under the table and squeezing. When I looked at him, he was smiling, a small, knowing smile. Once they were all seated, still silent, still processing, I remained standing. I'm sure you're wondering why I've asked you all here tonight. I began. My voice was different, clear, authoritative, the voice I used in boardrooms, and why I look a bit different than I did last week. Brielle, what's going on? Claudine finally managed what's going on. I replied calmly, is that I owe you all an apology. Last week, I wasn't entirely honest with you. In fact, I deliberately misrepresented myself. I pretended to be someone I'm not. Gregory leaned forward. I don't understand. I know. Let me explain. I walked slowly around the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Last week, you all made assumptions about me based on how I dressed, the car I drove, and the vague answers I gave about my career. You assumed I was poor, struggling, a burden waiting to happen. And I let you believe that because I wanted to see how you would treat someone you thought was beneath you. Silence. And treat me that way you did. You asked invasive questions about my finances. You discussed my retirement savings, or lack thereof, as if I weren't sitting right there. You offered me charity. You worried aloud about whether I would be a financial drain on Daniel. You cropped me out of your family photo. I paused, looking directly at Claudine. You offered me $500 a month to help with expenses, and in return, I assume you expected gratitude and deference. Claudine's face had gone pale. We were just trying to help. No, I said firmly. You were trying to establish dominance. You were trying to make sure I knew my place in the family hierarchy. You were trying to ensure that I understood that your family's money made you more valuable than Daniel's family, than me. That's not, Marcus began. Let me finish. My voice cut through his objection. I sat through that dinner and absorbed every condescending comment, every pitying look, every judgment, and I made notes. Mental notes about who you all are when you think you're dealing with someone powerless. I returned to my position at the head of the table. So tonight, I'm going to be honest with you, completely honest, and then you're going to decide how you want to proceed with your relationship with Daniel, and by extension with me. I took a breath. My name is Brielle Richardson. I am 58 years old. 30 years ago, I started as a file clerk at Morrison Pharmaceutical Distribution, making $7.15 an hour. Today, I am Senior Vice President of Operations. I oversee 11 states. I manage a $2 billion supply chain. I have 400 direct reports and 200 indirect reports. I sit on the executive leadership team. My decisions affect thousands of jobs and millions of lives. I let that sink in for a moment. My annual salary is $340,000 with bonuses, stock options, and profit sharing. My total annual compensation is between $480,000 and $520,000, depending on company performance. I own my home outright. It's worth $520,000. I have investment accounts worth $8 million. My 401k is valued at $3 million. My total net worth is approximately $8 million. Gregory's mouth had fallen open. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. Simone's eyes were enormous. Vivienne's hand had gone to her throat. But it was Claudine's face I focused on. She had gone from pale to gray, and her hands were trembling. You're a millionaire," Simone finally whispered, several times over. I confirmed. I have been for about 8 years, though my net worth didn't break 7 figures until I was 50. But your car, Marcus stammered, your clothes, your house, everything about you screams poor. I supplied, yes, that's what I wanted you to think last week. That's why I wore thrift store clothes and drove my old Camry and played dumb about Osso Buco, which, by the way, I've eaten many times. I've had it in Milan, at the original restaurant where it was invented. I walked to my chair and sat down, crossing my legs elegantly. I live modestly by choice, not necessity. I drive a 10-year-old car because it's reliable and I see no reason to replace it. I live in a middle-class neighborhood because I like my neighbors and I've built a life there. I shop at Target because their clothes are perfectly fine and I don't need a designer label to feel valuable. I have wealth, but I don't build my identity around it. I looked at each of them in turn. Unlike some people, Claudine found her voice. This is. I don't understand. Why would you humiliate yourself like that? Why would you pretend to be poor? I didn't humiliate myself. I said calmly, you humiliated me. Or you tried to. I simply gave you the opportunity to show me who you are when you think you have all the power. And you showed me exactly that. This was a test. Gregory's voice rose. You set us up. I gave you a scenario and watched how you responded. You responded with condescension, pity, and judgment. You treated me as less, then because you thought I had less, then? And that tells me everything I need to know about your character. That's not fair. Vivienne protested. We were trying to be helpful, to be kind. I interrupted. You asked me if I'd considered getting a roommate. Marcus offered to connect me with a financial advisor for people in my situation. Claudine suggested I look into government assistance. You discussed my funeral costs while I was sitting right there. That's not kindness. That's cruelty dressed up as concern. Natasha, who had been silent this entire time, suddenly spoke. Her voice was shaky. Mom, she's right. Everything she's saying. It's right. I watched it happen. I sat there and let you all treat her like she was pathetic, and I said nothing. I'm so sorry, Brielle. Natasha, don't apologize to her. Claudine snapped. She's the one who lied to us. I never lied. I corrected. I omitted information. There's a difference. When you asked if I worked in administration, I said yes. I do. I administer an entire regional operation. When you asked if I rent my home, I said yes, because at the time I technically did, even though I was actually the landlord. Everything I said was true. I just let you fill in the blanks with your assumptions. The door opened, and waiters entered carrying the first course. They placed dishes in front of each person, seared scallops with citrus foam, and microgreens arranged like artwork. Please eat, I said. Chef Antonio has prepared something special for us tonight. No one touched their food, Brielle, Gregory said, his voice strained. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to make us feel terrible? Because congratulations, it's working. No, Gregory. I'm trying to make you think. I'm trying to make you reflect on how you treat people, on how you judge worth, on what you value. Because here's the thing. I could have revealed myself last week. I could have corrected your assumptions immediately. But I didn't because I needed to know. I needed to know if you were good people who would treat a perceived less fortunate person with dignity, or if you were the kind of people who only respect money and status. I picked up my fork and took a bite of scallop. It was exquisite, and now I know. You're the second kind. The rest of the dinner was uncomfortable, to say the least. They ate in near silence, occasionally attempting conversation that died quickly. I remained pleasant but distant, answering questions about my career when asked, describing my path from file clerk to executive. At one point, Marcus asked, "Why did you never tell Daniel?" About the money, the success. I looked at my son, who had been quiet throughout, processing everything, because I didn't want him to grow up entitled. I wanted him to work for what he had, to understand that success is earned, not inherited. I wanted him to be a good man first and a successful man second. I squeezed Daniel's hand, and he is. He's everything I hoped he'd be. Kind, hardworking, humble. None of which would have happened if I'd raised him in luxury, telling him he didn't need to strive because Mom had millions in the bank. But you could have helped him more, Simone said quietly. With his student loans, with his first apartment, with building his character. I interrupted gently. Those struggles made him who he is, and I was there for every important moment. I just didn't write checks to smooth out every difficulty. As dessert arrived, individual chocolate soufflés with vanilla bean ice cream, Claudine finally spoke directly to me. I don't know what you want from us, Brielle. An apology, fine. I'm sorry, we're all sorry. We made assumptions and we were wrong. Is that what you wanted to hear? I put down my spoon and looked at her. Claudine, I don't want your apology. Forced apologies mean nothing. What I want is for you to understand something fundamental. You don't get to measure people's value by their bank accounts. You don't get to treat people as lesser because they have less. You don't get to be cruel and call it kindness. I stood up, signaling that the evening was coming to an end. I invited you all here tonight not to humiliate you, though I understand it may feel that way, but to teach you something, the same lesson I've spent 30 years learning. True wealth isn't in your investment portfolio. It's in your character, your integrity, your compassion. It's in how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you. I looked around the table. Some of you may leave here tonight angry. You may feel tricked or embarrassed, but I hope at least some of you leave here thinking about how you see the world, how you judge others, and whether that's really who you want to be. The check came $4 $200 for the private room, the exclusive menu, and the premium wine pairings I'd selected. I placed my corporate American Express card on the tray without even glancing at the total. As we stood to leave, Daniel pulled me aside. Mom, I have so many questions. I smiled. I know, and I'll answer all of them, but not tonight. Tonight, I just need you to know that everything I did, everything I've ever done, was because I love you more than anything in this world. Money doesn't matter. You matter. His eyes filled with tears. I love you too, and I'm sorry I didn't know. I should have asked more questions, paid more attention. You were exactly the son I hoped you'd be. Never apologize for that. We walked out together, leaving the Castellano family standing in the Leonardo room, grappling with their shattered assumptions. It's been 3 months since that dinner. Daniel and Natasha are still married, though I understand there have been some difficult conversations about family dynamics and boundaries. Natasha has distanced herself somewhat from her parents, which I understand has caused tension. But she visits me regularly now, just the two of us, and we've developed a relationship based on honesty rather than pretense. Gregory and Claudine sent a formal apology letter 2 weeks after the dinner. It was carefully worded and clearly written with legal consultation, which told me they were worried I might sue for defamation or emotional distress. I wouldn't, of course, but I didn't tell them that. Marcus and Simone unfriended me on social media and have refused to attend any gathering where I'm present. I'm fine with that. Vivian called me last month and asked if we could have coffee. We met and she told me that the dinner had really made her think about how she judges people. She started volunteering at a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching low-income individuals about budgeting and saving. She said my story inspired her to do better. I appreciated that. As for me, I'm still driving my Camry, still living in my modest house, still shopping at Target. The difference is that now Daniel knows the truth. And when we have dinner together, just the two of us at my kitchen table, eating spaghetti and talking about his projects at work, he sometimes looks at me with this expression of wonder. "I can't believe I never knew," he said last week. "I know," I replied. "I'm a very good secret keeper. But why keep it secret at all? Why not just live your life openly?" I thought about that. Because I learned a long time ago that money changes how people see you. Either they want something from you, or they resent you, or they assume things about your character based on your net worth. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to be Brielle, not Brielle the millionaire executive. He nodded slowly. "And the dinner, do you regret it?" "Not for a second. Those people needed to learn that lesson, and I was in a position to teach it. Would I do it again? Probably not. It was exhausting pretending to be someone I'm not, but I'm glad I did it once, because now I know exactly who has earned a place in our lives and who hasn't." Looking back, I can see that the seeds of that devastating dinner were planted years ago. In every assumption Natasha's family made about me, in every unasked question, in every moment they chose to judge rather than understand, and while the reveal was dramatic, even theatrical, it was also necessary. Because the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The truth about yourself, the truth about them, and the truth about what really matters in this life. It's not the car you drive or the clothes you wear or the restaurant where you eat. It's not the size of your house or your investment portfolio or the designer label on your handbag. It's how you treat people, all people, especially the ones you think have nothing to offer you. That's the measure of a person. That's the measure of a life. And on that measure, I'm wealthier than Gregory and Claudine could ever dream of being. My name is Brielle Richardson. I'm a mother, a senior vice president, and yes, a millionaire. But more than any of that, I'm a woman who knows that dignity isn't given by others. It's claimed by yourself and defended when necessary. And I will always defend it, always. Asterisk, thank you for letting me share my story with you today. If you've ever been judged, dismissed, or underestimated because of how you look or what people assume about you, I hope this story reminds you that their judgment says everything about them and nothing about you. Hold your head high, know your worth, and never, ever let anyone make you feel small. Asterisk, asterisk, if this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you handle it? Let's talk. Asterisk, asterisk, this is Brielle, reminding you that every story has a lesson and yours might be just beginning. Asterisk.